right. Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we have Senator Sydney Kamlager joining us on a What's Happening Wednesday. Sydney, how's it going?
It's going well. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really windy out there, so I'm excited that I'm inside talking to you.
Yeah, today another successful Groundhog Day. The groundhog saw his shadow for 6 more weeks of winter. Kind of how are you taking the news and what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't mind layering. I am a Chicago girl at heart, so I don't mind if it's windy and a little chilly. And but I will say, now that we're in the swing space, having to layer up to cross the street to go over to the Capitol and then come back and then go back. We're going to see how many assembly members and senators make it through February and March.
That's funny. There's been all these talks about, redistricting, and they're calling it the Great Resignation. Members are moving everywhere, running differently. Do you attribute the swing space walk to some of their decisions here?
Oh my God, yes. I think people were like, I'm so upset that I don't have any more parquet in my office that I am retiring today.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing.
Jokes. But I do think I do think for folks, there's been a shift in the kind of work, in the joy that comes from it. And I do think that that's played a large role in people's decisions to retire or to not seek reelection. Having a year and a half to be closer to home, I do think resets people's priorities.
Yeah. You have an interesting background. My producer really wants me to ask you about this. Before you got into politics, can you kind of tell us what you were doing?
Oh my goodness. I was a wild child before I got into politics. I'm a girl from Chicago. I spent got my first taste of politics by helping my grandmother get Harold Washington elected as the first Black mayor of Chicago, which is really important for folks from Chicago. I came out here to go to USC. I was here during the earthquake and the riots, both really pivotal moments for me and experiences. As a result of the earthquake, I went to graduate school back on the East Coast because I do not like shaky earth. But because of the riots and the sort of relationships that I built and the interest that was piqued in my heart about the city, I came back and I've been in LA ever since. I've worked in the nonprofit world. I've worked in the arts world. I've worked in the entertainment industry. I eventually ended up at Crystal Stairs, that's where I met Holly Mitchell. And then we kind of went on the road, working to help families find and pay for childcare and then getting her in the Assembly and the Senate. So I have had a very interesting journey that has married activism and the arts and politics. And I have to say, I find great joy in each of those things.
Yeah. I guess kind of during your arts period, you were an assistant to Delroy Lindo. Can you kind of tell us about that experience?
Yes. So, Delroy is, Crooklyn and Get Shorty and Ransom, and he was in the Five Bloods and this new one with Regina King and Idris Elba it was the Western. So family friend, known him for a really long time. I was his assistant and I ran his production company, Cia Luna Development. We produced a number of, 1-hour interviews with folks like Joan Chen, the really acclaimed director, and Charles Burnett and Spike Lee. And, Delroy is family to me. I think he is beautiful and amazing and brilliant and funny. And he's in California with his family. So he checks in on me from time to time. But it was a great experience. I mean, that's where I learned kind of, behind the scenes about the movie industry. That's where I came to learn a lot about, the trades and what goes into it and the hours that people work. And then you get to meet, celebrities, and you realize that they are real people too, with very real problems and challenges. But the highlight was actually working with him in Berkeley, producing this interview segment with Joan Chen. And we ended up at the recording studio that discovered CCR. And I mean, the wall was full of all of these platinum records from this amazing, rock band that, I mean, I think changed the landscape of music for folks. So that was a thrill.
That's awesome. Kind of, I guess, how did your like working for, and in the arts and the film kind of propel you into kind of working in the district for Holly Mitchell then?
So, I think the arts are really instructive for how we communicate with people. If it's theater, if it's movies, books, TV, it's really about storytelling, right? And how you listen, how you can transcribe a story, how you can share people's perspectives that aren't like yours, and really how you become more comfortable in your own skin. And I think when you're working in politics, when you're doing advocacy, which was what I was doing with Holly at Crystal Stairs, Supervisor Holly Mitchell at Crystal Stairs, it's all about how do you make other people comfortable, when you're sharing good news and bad news, and how are you comfortable with yourself, right? And so I think it really, provided me some tools, to make that work successful for me. Because it's hard, at the time I was there, we were having to tell people that the state didn't have any money and they were cutting budgets and we couldn't renew contracts. And I mean, that's hardcore for folks that are, providing care for kids and are really dependent on these reimbursement checks from the state.
At what moment did you know that you wanted to run for office at some point?
I ask that question to myself every day. I'm like, is this really what you want to do? So, my mother said when I was really little that I told her that I wanted to be in politics. And so like a couple years ago, she said, do you remember when you said that as a little girl? And I said, no, and you should have told me that was crazy making not to say that. But I think after I helped Miss Mitchell get into the assembly and I served as her district director, and then in the Senate, we started working to nurture other women and women of color to run for office. And she was very supportive of young candidates and new candidates. And you do so much work sort of training and like recruiting and supporting and, critiquing that I thought, well, I'm doing so much of this, I probably could do this. But it actually kind of took Holly saying, this is what you need to do. You look around and it's about building a bench. And so tag you're it, jump in. And there are all kind of statistics that say, you have to ask a woman 3 times to run before they decide. And, men wake up, they go to the bathroom and they say they're going to run for office, which is a joke. So it actually took her telling me this is something you need to do. Like, we need you in this space, tag you're it, for me to say, maybe this is something I can do. And sometimes you wake up and you question, is it the right decision? Do you have what it takes? Are you really making change in a way that's important? Because I will say it's an awesome job, but it's incredibly humbling.
And I guess what is so humbling about it? Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah. So the state is huge. I mean, they're like hundreds of agencies, right? There are thousands of employees and everyone is doing something that's supposed to help the state work better. And essentially that's supposed to provide services, for the millions of folks that live in the state. And it's a huge operation. It's not going to work 100% correctly all the time in every nook and cranny of the state. And it's also, the learning curve is quite high, right? Because we as legislators, part of our role is to create legislation that's about fixing policy, that's about making the work better, right, in the state. With all of these nooks and crannies and departments and programs and initiatives, it takes a minute to kind of figure out what those things are and what they do and how they work and what's the challenge and how, and there's also so much connective tissue. So that's humbling because most people run and they think they know everything. And then you get here and you're like, I don't think I know everything, which is like, a heavy thing for a legislator to admit. But I think that's one of the reasons why I do my Watch Wednesdays, because I try to bring a little clarity and a little fun to these concepts that are state government.
No, very interesting. You started out in the assembly and then you kind of moved over to the Senate. Kind of what differences have you noticed between the assembly and the Senate, and kind of what's your preference at this point?
So there are a lot more people in the assembly, and the color is green. And so in the swing space, we have different elevators. We had different elevators on that, in the Capitol. I'm being funny. I do feel like it's more ruckus on the assembly floor. So I would go into session to floor on the assembly, and I swear to God, I was like, let me get my Wheaties, let me take my B12, let me put on my little helmet, because something is about to jump off.
Right.
And on the Senate, it's much more congenial. People are like, oh, Senator. And so so that's different. It's a much smaller, the actual floor, is like almost half the size. So it does feel really tiny. But I will say what's different for me is I came in and I had friendships that I developed on the assembly side, before COVID. And when I came on to the Senate, it was during COVID. And so people were isolating. We don't sit next to each other on the floor. And so you don't really go out to events. So it has been much more of an isolating experience to be on the Senate side, because it's been harder to develop the kinds of relationships that I was able to develop on the assembly side. Not to say that the senators are nasty, because they're not. So senators, if you're listening, I'm not saying you're nasty. I'm just saying COVID has prevented us from getting to know each other.
Right. Have you found that being on the Senate is I guess helping you get a lot more of your policies done than it would on the assembly side?
Well, you only have to count to 21. So
easier.
That's a little easier. But then you're like, whoo, the gorilla that is the assembly is waiting for you. I feel like policy can be a little easier to get done on the Senate side. But I also feel like senators I shouldn't be telling any trade secrets, but I do feel like senators, it's harder to you got to really talk to folks. Senators are like, tell me about the policy. What's this really about? You're new. What do you know? So now at the end of the day, it's the same, man. At the end of the day, it's the same. You got to count your votes. You got to know what the bill is. You got to work with your opposition. You got to make sure your supporters are got their stuff together. You still got to have a well-oiled machine on either side.
With redistricting happen, it seems like, musical chairs, everyone's moving everywhere. And you've kind of had this kind of an exciting announcement. You're going to run for Congress. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about your congressional race and kind of your thoughts behind running for Congress?
Yeah, so I don't know how much I can get into. I don't want to get into trouble because I'm here talking about state stuff. But great opportunities. So many. I think 22 is going to be a turning point for the legislature, because so many folks are retiring and other opportunities have opened up. And so, people like me have looked at those kinds of opportunities. It's bittersweet. I love the work that I'm doing and love the policies that, I plan to champion this year that we've been successful at getting across the finish line last year. So I will say I'm really excited. But I don't want to get dinged for, saying stuff I shouldn't be talking about on a state platform, because, the man does listen to the podcast. And I ain't trying to get in trouble with the man.
I think in Congress, you have to count like over 200. That's going to be.
Dude, that's why I got a calculator. I have a calculator here too. I'm like, I do got my little vote card. Could you imagine like vote cards other places? So I'll be like, oh my God. 5 pages of a vote card?
Overwhelming. Can you kind of talk? You seem to have kind of like this kind of serendipitous kind of like events of like, moving from the assembly to the Senate and now having this opportunity in Congress. Can you kind of talk to that about kind of how you've just had these cool opportunities kind of do some different things here?
So yeah, I know I have this like, I don't know. I don't want to say, don't you hate when people like start talking about themselves and they like say all these amazing things and you're like, dude, you ain't that amazing. So I don't want to say anything like that, but I will say that, I consider myself, a pretty hard worker and really strong work ethic. I try not to piss people off immediately. And I really try to produce, because I think at the end of the day, that's what people care about. Like, what are you doing? Like what, and how can we work together, right? And how can I be included in the thing that you're working on? So that's sort of how my work ethic translates into, my job performance. And I just think people see that. And, unbeknownst to me, I think folks have taken notice and they're like, hey, we really like how she does things. So we want her to carry a bill. It's okay if I leave, because she can run for this. I want her to help me champion. So I think it's that. I also think it's luck, right time, right place. Right. I knew, for example, that the senator was planning to run to be on the board of supervisors. But you know what? I'm going to tell you something. I knew she was going to do that. And I still was like, it did not process in my mind that it was going to happen while I was in the assembly and that I would be running for the Senate. So literally I was like, oh yeah, it's like, she's going to run and then she'll just be the senator and on the board. And then I like very, very late in the game, I was like, oh snap, that means she's going to go. And then we're going to have another election. So, sometimes I have like delayed reaction because I'm like, I can't believe we have to do this again.
And again. Yeah. The grind.
And then like, who wants to step into the shoes of Holly Mitchell?
Big shoes to fill. But
Big shoes to fill.
You're doing pretty well so far.
And so Senator Roth, whenever he sees me, he's like, how you doing? I just love Holly Mitchell. He's like, how you doing? I just love Holly Mitchell. I'm like, hey, dude, what about me? He's like, tell Holly Mitchell I said hi.
That's funny. You're kind of sharing a story about when you first got into kind of working in politics. We had budget deficits and, cuts left and right. And kind of for the last few years, we've had these big surpluses. This year we have another huge budget surplus. Kind of what are some of your thoughts about the budget this year and some of the things you're looking to do?
Well, I am so grateful that I'm working in a state that has been blessed with a surplus. Amen to the gods and the goddesses. I certainly hope that the budget chair and the governor support all of my budget requests because they're all amazing and they should definitely be supported. In case you're listening, Nancy Skinner, Phil Ting, and Governor Newsom. But my hope is actually that this year we will really double down on investments for a statewide wellness initiative program. We've seen an uptick in suicides, mental health, I think is going to be the next pandemic. You see it with not only the Great Resignation, but the Great Malaise. I think there's been so much toxicity nationally for the past 4 years. And it's like anything, when you get sick and you have an infection and you're not really working deliberately to heal, infections can kind of fester and then grow and metastasize. And I think that's what we're seeing with this increase in suicides, increase in violence. I mean, this toxicity, not only in politics, but sort of, as folks are trying to re-normalize what it means to socialize with intimidation and bullying. And so, not just teachers, not just students, not just essential workers, but, other folks kind of across the workforce spectrums. So I really think we have to double down on that, how we infuse behavioral health support, but also mental health supports, how we continue to destigmatize mental health and not just talk about it when we're talking about people who are unhoused or who use substances. So many people are faking it until they make it. And I think people are burnt out with that. And that coupled with the tensions and the deaths from COVID, um, have us at this very critical moment. So my hope is that we really double down and deeply invest in this space.
That's interesting you point to that, because a lot of talk has been about this great resignation and about how people aren't coming back to work or looking to do different things, and everyone's trying to get a pulse on what's happened. And it doesn't just seem like life's going to go back to how it was 2 years ago. Can you kind of talk about that and kind of what you're seeing in your district and kind of your thoughts?
Yeah, so I love my district. It's the 30th. It will be the 28th. And so just to give people an idea of what it is, we sort of are cocooned by freeways. Yes, freeways in LA. So we have the 10 freeway to the north, the 110 to the east, Slauson to the south. No, Slauson like all the way to 120th and Central. So almost like to the 105. And then the 405 to the west. So we have really affluent neighborhoods. And then we have folks that, are certainly working class. Downtown, Central City, Cheviot Hills, Mid-City, Ladera Heights, Mar Vista Palms. So we've seen everything. I represent folks that have been able to, work from home and that have supports and have people coming in, helping them with their kids, have access to the vaccinations and the boosters and the tests, very early on. And then we have folks that are essential workers and are working a couple of jobs, that have side hustles that are, that are really important to how they, make the rent. And people are really interested, I think, in being entrepreneurs and finding their own way, because quality of life has become incredibly important. And like working someplace where you have to commute long distances, where you might not have the kind of benefits that you need, where you might not have the kind of time off that you need or the flexibility, where you have a lot of folks living in your house and young kids helping other, littler kids like manage. I see all of that in the homes of the constituents that I represent. So COVID has been great because it's encouraged people to come up with new, business models for the jobs that they're trying to, create. And it's been really tough because many of the folks, many of my communities, were last to get the PPE. They were last to get access to the tests. They were last to get access to the vaccines. So lots of disparities across the spectrums, but I love my district.
This is the second year of a 2-year session. Kind of what are some of the bills you, I guess, are kind of finishing up from last year and some new ones you're proposing this year?
Well, I was thinking about reintroducing AB 369, which was my street medicine bill. That was about making sure that you could have mobile mobile healthcare units to help folks get access to care who are unhoused. But lo and behold, it found its way into the state budget. So somebody was listening. But I've got a spicy package. It's a little bit of criminal legal reform, having access to medical records and being able to access, get your identification that you need when you get out. Definitely going back to the healthcare space, trying to rerun the bill about drug importation from Canada. Even Florida with crazy DeSantis, is trying to do this. And, we know that the costs are really exorbitant. And so how do we get cheaper prices, right? Working on that. ACA 3, which is about taking slavery and involuntary servitude out of the California Constitution. Who would have thought? It's still in there. Shout out for Black History Month. We got like a lot of bills that actually this year that I'm running are focusing on economic justice and equity. So how do we bring parity, right? How do we take away some barriers that are preventing people from having access to capital and opportunities to, find and keep jobs and develop family wealth? Not family wealth like billions, right. But like, so I can make my mortgage and pay for my kid to have lunch at school and, be able to wash my clothes and save some pennies and not be living paycheck to paycheck. So I'm really focused on bills that will allow that to happen.
It's so cool what you do with these, what's happening Wednesdays and
Yes.
videos and explaining things. Kind of what's one piece of California politics or the legislature that you haven't explained yet that you would like people to understand?
So I have not explained what goes on in Rules Committee. So I sit on rules and we do confirmations, for the governor. That's kind of heady because you get all these binders about information about all these people and all these departments. And that's when I'm like, Lord have mercy, this is what you do. So we haven't explained that. We do have one coming out today. I am in contract negotiations with my puppets because there was such demand for them. Now they have presented me with these rider contracts. They want the green M&Ms and they don't want to work on Thursdays. And so they're part of a puppet union. And, I am definitely pro-labor. So I'm working with the puppets to come up with some, other topics that they are willing to discuss. But, what happens in rules is a biggie, right, for the Senate and the Assembly and kind of how the floor runs. People don't really know about that.
Yeah, you're right. Rules is such a mystery, kind of.
What happens in rules?
Stays in rules.
I know. Well, that's right. What happens in rules stays in rules. We should do karaoke one day in rules. I think so. I said, Pro Tem, let's do some karaoke while we're trying to confirm this person for.
Get the ratings up.
Yeah. It's like cable access. Ain't nobody watching our hearings.
Well, awesome, Sydney. Thank you so much for taking the time and hanging out with us here. Just love the jacket and the outfit and looking forward to you getting those puppets back to work.
Thank you. They are taking their break right now. And I do want to say thank you for recognizing the outfit. I'm also a supporter of Me and Me. We are a huge supporter of she's off her break. We are huge supporters of vintage clothing. So my outfit today is all from resale shops. So it's a way that we can protect the environment. You don't always have to buy new. You can buy used and you can make it work. And she agrees.
Awesome.
Hot damn.
Hot damn. Well, thank you, Sydney. Have a great Wednesday and can't wait to see what's coming out next.
Thank you so much. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Bye.